Prepare for a true revolution.
Actually, you can prove God exists.
Questioning tradition, because what you've been taught isn't always true.
The truth will set you.
Welcome to Truth Revolution. This is where faith and reason meet. I am Pastor Dave, and this is Pastor Jeff.
Welcome to Truth Revolution. We are going to talk about amputees today.
That's it?
Well, basically, we're also going to answer a Bible contradiction. Okay. But really, we're going to go through an article. You know, atheists have this argument that they say, okay, if God heals people and if God's real, why doesn't God heal amputees?
Ah, I see.
And so we're going to discuss that. Why doesn't God heal amputees? And we're going to go through an article by Brett Kunkel called Miracles and Unbelief. He's responding to this argument. Now, if you just type in Google, why doesn't God heal amputees, you're going to find that there's a website about it. There's a whole bunch of information about it. I tried to get Brett Kunkel from Stand to Reason on our show for this. His schedule didn't make him available. We've had guys from Stand to Reason on before, but we're just going to kind of parse his article. He makes some really good points. But also, Dave, I found some interesting healing stories.
Did you now?
We're going to share those.
Okay.
But we're going to, let's just imagine for a minute that we haven't found any stories of God healing any amputees or anything. What does this mean? That's what we're going to talk about. We're also going to answer Bible contradiction. Where are we from, Dave?
Revolution Church.
And where's that located?
Salina, Kansas.
How do they get there?
On the internet, you can find us at revo.church, or if you want to Google us, you can find us at 1111 West South. If you're Google mapping us.
We also worldwide stream live online, so you can watch our services Sunday mornings at
revo.church.
And that would be live.revo.church. Our services times are at
9 a.m., 11 a.m., and 5 p.m. on Sundays.
Very good. Now, let's get into this because...
I feel like I just passed a test.
Yay for Dave! He's a pastor here, and he knows our service times. All right, so, yeah, we like to have fun, but there are some really, really serious questions going on here.
Right.
Have you ever heard this question about why God doesn't heal amputees?
No, but it's along the same lines I think of as why does God let babies die and stuff like that? I mean, I would assume, without looking at any of the material, that the answer is along the same lines, maybe?
Well, what the argument actually is, it's not about just why does God let bad things happen. What they're actually saying is God doesn't really heal people. And all of you who think that God heals people are wrong. Because you think God healed that cold you had,
right?
Or you think God healed that rash that went away,
right? It just ran its course.
Or
right?
You think that God healed this person from the heart attack that they were having, and that even the doctors don't know what happened. And what they would say is there's some sort of naturalistic explanation for all of this. And they're saying the reason we know that God didn't do it is all you have to do is look at amputees,
right?
And God has never healed an amputee. You've never seen an amputee with no arm grow an arm,
right?
And so they'd say so. If God really healed people, why aren't we seeing amputees be healed?
Right. The proof isn't actually the seeing. We can't see inside a person's body to see their heart got fixed or their cold is no longer there.
That is exactly right. And so we're going to kind of talk about that. Why wouldn't God heal amputees? But I've got some interesting stories about God healing. But before we even get to that, let's just look at this article. You can find. We're going to link to it if you go to truthrevolution.tv. Why won't God heal amputees? Brett Kunkel, he says, first, I point out this atheist argument is guilty of a logical fallacy called a non sequitur. The fallacy is committed when a conclusion or statement does not logically follow from a previous argument or statement.
Right.
So what this means is, if I say, man, I stubbed my toe this morning, obviously God doesn't exist.
Right. That makes no sense.
Right, that's a non sequitur. It doesn't, what I'm trying to say doesn't really follow my argument.
Right.
In some ways, you can make some emotional leaps. I stubbed my toe. It caused me emotional pain. I don't think God would do that, so God must not really be there. But it's an emotional jump, not a logical jump. It's not a logical reason. What happens here is let's just assume that God doesn't heal amputees. Let's just assume for a minute that God hasn't answered any prayer ever. He's never healed anyone.
Okay.
Does that mean God does not exist?
Absolutely not.
That does not logically follow. Okay? I'm a preacher, and I have the capacity to preach anywhere that I am physically. I've been in pretty much every neighborhood in Salina, Kansas.
Right.
I have not preached in hardly any neighborhoods in Salina, Kansas.
Oh, so to them, you don't preach.
To them, I don't preach.
Right.
Maybe they think I'm not a preacher.
Right.
You see, just because I am a preacher doesn't mean that I have to preach in every single neighborhood that I am in.
That's logical.
All right. So, and just because God can heal doesn't mean he has to heal for his existence to be validated.
Right.
I'm going to say it again. Just because God can heal doesn't mean he has to heal for his existence to be validated.
Right.
If we were not going to, if we found no amputees that were healed, if we found no other person that had a prayer answered, it would not follow that God does not exist.
Exactly. Because God does not have to do things in order to exist.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's like, say I never work.
Well, you say God doesn't have to do things in order to exist, but what you actually are saying is God doesn't have to do things that we would expect him to do to exist.
Right,
I mean,
right.
he'd have to do something to exist, but
That's
if
true.
he existed, something's going to happen. But
I'm just saying that if nothing ever happened in our visual
Yes.
reference,
yes,
that doesn't follow.
if we never experienced, if we never saw him, if we never heard him, if we never felt him, if we never smelt him,
Right.
we still would have no epistemological warrant to reject his existence.
Right.
So that's what you're really saying. Now, the interesting thing is that we would argue that there's really good evidence to believe in God apart from prayers being answered.
Amen.
As a matter of fact, you can't, and I don't think you should use answered prayer or healings as the main reason to
Right.
prove God's existence. I also don't think you can use it to prove God's non-existence. People have done these prayer studies, and they say if you do a prayer study, like you scientifically line up, you're going to pray for some people, you're going to not pray for some people, and you see which people heal faster. Well, okay, even if you try to do a double-blind study, you have not done a double-blind study. Why? Because you're doing the test on God, and God knows what you're doing.
Right. We talked about this before. If the deer in the forest knew that we were looking at it, trying to figure out what it does,
It's going to act differently.
right, it's going to act differently. God has said, do not test me.
There's no such thing as a double-blind study
Right.
on God.
Exactly. He knows everything.
He's already told us, if you test me, I will not participate.
Right.
And so we should not be surprised to find that prayer studies don't give us any results or answers anyway, because he's already told us in his word, if you test me, I'm not going to participate in that. Are you serious right now?
Right.
So, but that's not a reason to reject God's existence. There are logical reasons: teleological, axiological, ontological, cosmological arguments for God's existence. We go over these in lots of the other shows. Argument from design. A few weeks ago, we had Hugh Ross on. We talked about the specificity of our universe, how finely detailed it is,
Right.
down to the fact that if the gas giants in our universe clear the way for meteors and asteroids from pummeling our planet, but they also cause certain waves that would disrupt life on Earth, and so you have the smaller planets, Mars and Venus and
Even
Mercury,
everything out.
that evens out the gas giants from pulling and destroying us, life on Earth. Yeah, it's exquisitely designed to promote life.
Right.
So these are really good reasons to believe in God, even if He doesn't answer prayer. But let's go to the second line of
Okay.
argument there.
He says, second, I pointed out, his atheist friend simply assumed no amputees had been healed. Just because an atheist says there's never been an amputee healing in thousands of years of human history doesn't mean it's true.
Now I'm going to bring up a report here in just a little bit
Okay.
that I want us to think about. But let's just say that I have no reports. Let's just say I have no reports of anyone being healed ever. Just like we said, it doesn't mean it's not true. Just because we can't find a report of an amputee being healed doesn't mean an amputee has never been healed.
Right. It's always difficult to prove something in the negative.
Exactly. Atheists tell us this all the time, right?
Yeah.
We say, hey, show us that there is no God. They're like, oh, can't prove a negative. Can't prove a negative.
Right.
Now you need to go to our show with True Reason with our guest Tom Gilson to see why we actually would suggest that atheists aren't just holding a negative position. They're actually making a positive claim that we can refute.
Right.
Just go to truthrevolution.tv and type in Gilson, Gilson. But that's aside from the point. Atheists do say you can't prove a negative. And so for them to say no amputee has ever been healed, they're asking us to prove a negative.
Right.
You can't do that. Right? You can't.
Right, you can't. Things when you have proof, you have to have actual proof to prove something, because you can't prove something with nothing. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does,
Okay.
Dave.
Just making sure.
The writer,
myself.
the writer of the article says, I've never researched this question, but I wanted this young Christian to catch a healthy bit of skepticism, particularly when it comes to anti-Christian claims. Research is now in order, but my point was you cannot simply assume what needs to be proven. This is very, very good. There are so many Christians who, when someone comes to you and says, hey man, God didn't do this, or this didn't happen, or evolution has this much proof, or whatever they throw out there, we simply accept what has been said and we try to argue on the basis of what they've said. Now, this isn't, like he says, we need to catch a healthy bit of skepticism when it comes to anti-Christian claims.
Right.
When someone says that no one has ever been healed, how do we know that?
Right. The thing is that I think we've been programmed to not have skepticism if we believe, because there's a really good reason to have skepticism for non-belief.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it works both ways.
Yeah. Explain that a little bit more.
Well, the simple fact that, if you're raised Christian, you're Christian your entire life.
Yeah.
Okay. You have basically squeezed a lot of your skepticism out because you believe.
Okay.
And you have just a spirit of belief. Okay?
So when a challenge comes up, it doesn't really bother you that much, is what you're saying?
Right. Well, when a challenge comes up, it's like it's hard for a person that has belief to actually switch to skepticism because their mode of operandi is belief. So when somebody brings up a negative, they freak out a little bit because they're not supposed to be skeptical, but we can be skeptical of certain things, such as non-belief. I know it sounds weird. We're going to be skeptical of the skeptics,
Yes.
And so I think that's one of the corners that Christians kind of paint themselves into. They don't have a healthy dose of skepticism because they've never been taught to be skeptics. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it does make sense. Basically, it goes in line with what we suggest in this show, that God is the author of wisdom, and that questions are not irreverent.
Right.
Questions are there to help us find the truth. But when someone brings up a challenge, we don't dare just dismiss it, but we don't dare accept the base point that they're making either. Someone says God's never healed an amputee. Well, all of a sudden we want to spit out 100 reasons why that might be. But also, let's not just accept that God maybe has never healed an amputee. Like
Do you have proof God's never healed an amputee?
Well, again, that'd be proving a negative,
Right.
which would be almost impossible. But the author says if we can produce a credible report of an amputee's missing limb being healed and replaced, is the atheist willing to accept that evidence? This is a massive question.
Right.
So let's kind of turn the tables around. So if we were able to show, oh yeah, you know what? Actually, amputees have been healed. What would you do with that? If you're a listener right now and you're a little bit of a skeptic, if I can show you that there are credible reports of amputees being healed or people missing digits being healed, would you accept that? And would you say God must exist? Now, I actually went to an atheistic forum and was exploring this question. And some of them would say, well, no. Even if I saw an atheist limb grow back, I would not accept that God exists. Why not? And they would come up with, some of the most off-wall things you could imagine. I think they'd be more likely to believe that someone accidentally got some starfish DNA inserted into their blood and they regrew a limb based on...
Well, the same thing is true for Christians, the same thing for atheists. They are programmed to be skeptical, and belief is just simply not in their vocabulary.
Okay, I said that I had some stories about healing, right?
Yeah.
Right after the break, I'm going to give those to you.
Okay.
Have amputees been healed? I think the answer is yes.
Whoa.
TruthRevolution.tv. We're going to be right back after this break. It's a couple minutes long. You need to come out to Revolution Church. I know you've been thinking about it. I know you considered it.
Just do it.
Just do it, man. Think about the kids.
Right?
And
whatever that means.
Whatever that means. Maybe you have kids. Think about them. But we do have a great kids program, actually. So that's a good point. Think about the kids. 9, 11, and 5 p.m. 9 a.m., 11 a.m., 5 p.m. TruthRevolution.tv. Our church's website's revo.church. Just come on out. We're going to be right back. Talk about some healing after this break.
Truth Revolution.
Has God ever Healed an amputee. That's the question today.
It is the question. And we've been going through an article from standtoreason.org by Brett Kunkel. Really, really good resource there, Stand to Reason. We're going to link to the article. But this question's all over the place from atheists. All over the place.
Right, because they're making assumptions and leaps that don't necessarily follow. Like you said, it's a non sequitur question. Or
even if God hasn't
statement.
healed amputees, doesn't follow that God doesn't exist.
Right.
But it's a good question. Why doesn't God heal amputees? Why not? Why wouldn't he heal amputees? Well, I'm going to suggest that maybe he has.
Okay.
I've got 3 stories here. And by the way, this did not take very much research. I just was able to contact a very intelligent friend of mine, as well as just some Google work for 2 of these. Now, there's one of them that took a little more work. But the first I'm going to share, you can find this on Google yourself. I'm not very happy with the source that I found on this story, but you can Google it, you can find it all over. Apparently, this guy was on Phil Donahue's show because of this amazing thing that happened. I have not been able to find record of him being on Phil Donahue. I have found record saying that he was on Phil Donahue's show. I have not found Phil Donahue's show.
That would have been a long time ago.
Yeah, I would have been a long time ago. So, and to be honest, I didn't contact the network or anything, so I didn't even try that route. But there's a man named Gene Mullenax, and he has a story about how he was injured. And he got TB. This was back in the 1950s.
Right.
Okay, and what happened was because this infection was so bad, the doctors had to remove his lung and some ribs. Okay, he had no lung. Would you consider this somewhat of an amputation story?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, it's not like you're missing an arm, but there is no lung.
Right.
Right. X-rays. They have doctors who remove the lung. You're actually missing a big body part here.
Right. So there's ways to actually prove what's going on here.
That's right. And just for the record, lungs don't spontaneously erupt into your body.
Right.
Okay. It's not like they just regrow. Okay. He had gone, I don't remember how long it was, a year or 2 years with no lung. He was very ill, and he heard about this guy who was doing tent meetings, was praying for people to be healed. And he went to this tent meeting, and he was very skeptical. He actually thought it was a circus to begin with, and he thought, well, you know what? I'm probably not going to live very long. I'm just going to go to a circus. And he went in there and he saw people start to get healed, and he's quite skeptical. And he actually said, everything I see at first was people being healed on the inside, right? Someone was sick, or someone couldn't walk, and now they can walk, or things like that. But he got in line. This was after a couple of days. He actually talked to his wife about it. He's like, I don't really believe it, but what if it is true? Maybe they could heal me. I don't know. So he got into line, and in front of him was a baby with there was a large mark on the baby's face, like a growth, not quite a wart, but something bigger than that, like some cancerous thing on the baby's face. And he thought, well, that baby can be healed, and I could be healed too, because this is not this thing on this baby's face is an outside tumor. It's physical. I can see it. I don't have to just trust. Well, the baby went up there, and apparently, as he explains it, the baby was healed. This thing came off the baby's face.
Okay.
And so he went up and he was prayed for, and he explains how the feeling he had, I don't want to get into the sensationalism of it. He explains the feeling he had and how he felt different. And so he went to the same doctor who x-rayed him. The doctor examined him and x-rayed him multiple times. He kept saying, no, we must have the wrong x-rays. We must have done the wrong side. We must have something. So they went back and x-rayed him again, and they checked. And he said that, and this is the 1950s, mind you, but he said that the doctor actually cursed. Like he said, he looked at the x-rays and said some words that he could not repeat, that we can't repeat on air.
Yeah.
He was flummoxed. He could not believe what he saw. He was so surprised. He'd actually, through the x-ray, he found a new lung inside Gene.
Wow.
And so they decided to do a scope down his throat to actually do some checks, and sure enough, there was an actual new lung. Now, this is the other part I couldn't verify. Okay, this is all from Gene's own testimony. The other part I couldn't verify. I need to submit something to the FBI for a records check.
Okay.
I wasn't able to do that in time for the show. But apparently, the FBI actually investigated because the man who prayed for Gene to get healed had actually shared the story about him healing this man and regrowing a lung. And so the FBI thought, well, this is bunk, right? This guy's a fraudster, so we're going to nail him for fraud.
Exactly.
So they interviewed Gene, and they went and looked at X-rays, and the FBI dropped their case.
Wow.
Because Gene really had regrown a lung. So Gene Mullenax, Mullenax. Apparently, he was on Phil Donahue's show, even, although I haven't been able to verify that.
Very interesting.
Interesting. So that's one story. Now, I also, I had heard a report of a man named J.P. Moreland. Ever heard of him?
Oh, yeah.
How come? He's been on our show. He's a world-famous philosopher, and this is about a report that he had witnessed. I emailed him. I said, hey, JP, I heard that you saw this happen. Could you tell me if this is true or not? And he said, well, it's not quite true. He didn't see this happen himself. He said, but I and two other Talbot professors interviewed the Fuller professor, Peter Wagner. Okay, now, Peter Wagner, I believe is a PhD, Fuller professor, J.P. Moreland, world-famous PhD philosopher.
Right.
These are high-quality men of high reputable trustworthiness. Okay,
Right.
They have integrity. Peter was the dean at Fuller University. He had a son and a daughter-in-law coming on furlough from the mission field, and so the dean, he was the dean at Fuller, had a son and daughter-in-law coming home on furlough from the mission field. Their son was born with no holes in the side of his head, though there were eardrums inside. They were useless,
Right.
though. There were no holes on the side of it. He couldn't hear. Okay, it was just basically picture a flat piece on your head.
Right.
Nothing there. You couldn't hear, no ears. So the dean asked Wagner, Peter Wagner, the professor, to pray for his grandson. Now, he agreed with little or no faith. He prayed twice and nothing happened. So the family drove to a restaurant for lunch. When they got there, the son had blood running down both sides of his head. Now, listen to this. Holes appeared, and ear stubs had grown.
What?
Enough, yeah. In a matter of however long it took them to drive to lunch. Ear stubs grew enough that plastic surgeons could actually attach an artificial ear right on that stub, and the ear holes were there. The sound could go in, and he could apparently hear.
Wow, interesting.
That is that not insane?
That is insane, and I from an atheistic point of view, I would say that they would say, you're just making stuff up to back your story up.
Well, this is why I actually contacted J.P. Moreland personally.
Right.
So I'm getting it from the source who interviewed the guy. All right, this is you. If you want to contact me, I can give you some contact information.
There you go.
All right. He also says he recommends the book by the cardiologist Chauncey Crandall, the book Touching Heaven. I bought the book, haven't been able to read through it yet. We're going to check that out. Now, the third amputation story is one called The Miracle of Calendar. This is the one I'm the most skeptical about.
All right.
But in 1640, there's a man named Miguel Pellicer. He's 20 years old. His leg was amputated after a wagon ran over it. His leg went gangrene. After a while, they amputated it. Okay, he prayed and he prayed and he prayed. He begged God. He anointed his leg with oil daily. He sought for God for years to heal him. 2.5 years later, it's reported that his mother came into his bedroom and saw 2 feet sticking out of the covers and thought, whoa, this is not my son.
Right.
And so her husband went in to investigate, and sure enough, it was his son. He had grown a leg after praying. So there are these stories of amputees being healed. Period. There are the stories. So we're going to come back and talk about that in just a second, but right now we're going to answer a Bible contradiction.
Bible contradiction.
All right, Bible Contradiction brought to you by errancy.org. All right, Jesus, calling out a loud breath, said, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. And having said this, he breathed his last. That's Luke 23:46.
Yeah.
However, look at John 19:30. When Jesus had received the sour wine, he said, it is finished. And he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. So,
Which one did he say?
when did he say, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit? Or did he say it is finished?
Well, this is just really a misunderstanding of how the Bible is written.
Yeah.
Okay, the Bible is not a court stenographer writing down every word and letter that was said verbatim.
Right.
Okay, these are people reiterating stories in human terms, right? So in our cracked acronym, we would use the A for author's intention. Was the author intending to communicate a stenography report? No. The author was intending to communicate what Jesus' last words were. If Dave had a big, long paragraph, I could walk away and say, Dave's last word, he said to me, was this. And Sam, my video guy, could walk away and say, it was this. And we would both be telling you the truth.
Right.
Even though our statement would be slightly different. Okay, we're not giving a court report here. We're giving human testimony, what they believed was the most important thing to communicate in the last of Jesus' sentences. Pretty simple.
Yeah.
So that, my friends, is the answer for our Bible contradiction today.
Bible contradiction.
All right. I just want to... There's a few other things here that Brett Kunkel writes. He says, even personally witnessing a miracle is no guarantee that someone will believe. Right? Even if you saw this miracle, there's no guarantee that you believe. It does not necessitate proof that you believe or demand that you believe. But because the problem is a moral problem, not an evidence problem. There's plenty of evidence to believe in God, but people don't want to step into the light, admit they're sinners, admit that they've rejected God. They don't want to accept God's authority in their life. That's the main problem.
Right.
So for you listening, the problem for you really isn't that there's no evidence to believe. The problem is that you aren't willing to accept the authority of God in your life and come to Him with repentance. The Bible covers over 100,000 years of human history, and it took 1,500 years to be completed. And all that time, we only see gigantic miracles during the lives of Moses, Elijah and Elisha, Jesus, and the apostles, right? That's four different people, basically. 1/2% of human history is when the Bible records miracles happening. The vast majority of Bible history
Not happening.
is not saying giant miracles happen.
Right.
It's saying, look at the evidence and then trust in God, even if you don't see an amputee healed. Our response to God is based on whether or not we're willing to accept Him, not on whether or not we accept these stories we hear.
Amen. Well said.
All right. Thanks for listening. TruthRevolution.tv is our website. Thank you to all of you who support the show. There are a few of you out there that do that. God bless you. Come on out to Revolution Church. We'd love to have you no matter what you dress like. Doesn't matter to us. TruthRevolution.tv.